Woo! We're doing this live.
Fuck
Bill
it.
O'Reilly to this
Fuck
motherfucker.
it. We're doing it live. I don't know when the audio's cutting in, but hello there, everyone. The one person waiting and
The one
watching right
person
now.
waiting and watching like the mantis cucks.
In case you're wondering, it's just myself. I'm Adam, and over across from me is.
I'm Tech Priest, across the country from him, but still here in spirit.
But yeah, originally we were talking with Randall about specifically alien abductees and the weird stories and how they seem to have one thing in common, which is a bug man just kind of looking. Oh no, they ran away. Apparently, alien abductees are not what people come here for. What people come in for is
I
fucking
mean, there's
Shadowrun and other things.
a game about alien abductees. It's called Changeling.
Yeah, and I swear White Wolf at one point was trying to make an alien game.
They might have.
I think it was like Alien. It's not Alien Hunger, but like I think it's like Alien or something. I don't know.
I think FAFSA tried to make an aliens RPG, but I could be wrong on that.
I do know that there. Are you talking about the license? Or are you talking about just
License?
Okay, so the Xenomorph.
Yeah.
I don't know who made the '80s one, but that one was pretty good if you liked flowcharts.
Yeah.
But yeah, today's topic is Shadowrun. Just because I was in a cyberpunky mood, and the magic coin told me that Shadowrun is what we're picking rather than cyberpunk.
Ome wa Shinderu Chummers. This is Wiz, and goddamn the fucking slang changes are annoying, but I mean it's a setting 50 like it was like 70 years in the future from when it came out. Like I'm not gonna blame them too much on it.
It
Really
sounds like you had a stroke.
I know. I really enjoy the fact that like FAFSA did at least a basic elementary school homework for their setting building.
Yeah, it is pretty sweet because what was it? The idea was that around because this was made in like the 80s and I think 90s really, that Y2K was a big cultural thing. And if I remember right, the original take was that around 1999 there was a changing of the age, and they even put research into like the reason we had all those mythical creatures was ages are kind of not quite cyclical, but they occur.
Yeah.
And around
The
Y2K, magic came back.
Not exactly. It was a little later than Y2K. Y2K had a couple of things that happen the run up. There's what's called the surge babies, which is basically that these are kids that were born with elf and dwarf traits early because the magic background level is starting to rise, basically.
Because again, the ages are changing.
But the real big event is 2012, but there's also a bunch of other lead ups. There's also something called Vitas that happens, which is
is this the later edition 2012, or did they actually go with that in the original?
They actually went with 2012 in the original edition.
That goes to show you how long that fucking Nibiru thing was a thing.
Yeah, again, this was part of it was because Native American spiritualism was a huge part of early Shadowrun stuff. They basically did a 5th grade level of homework on Native American cultures and said this stuff's cool.
They probably
we want to put this in a game
and DARPANET to find out the weird New Agers who thought that the Mayan calendar meant something.
Yes, and also because it's a year that sounds epical. 2012, you know, it sounds like it's an epic defining year.
Does it really?
Sort of like 2020, you know, the numbers work.
2020 does work. And I'm not saying that because of what happened. I'm just saying because of the palindrome kind of effect.
Yeah. Anyway.
Actually, 2002 would be a more appropriate end of times kind of scenario, wouldn't it? I'm surprised no one did that.
There's probably somebody that did it. Point being, though, FAFSA decides that they want to do a game that nobody's done their concept before. I think Cyberpunk has already come out, and Gibson is popular in nerd circles.
Well, yeah, so I'm pretty sure you have the works of Philip K. Dick, like what was it, the Total Recall? We remember it so you can sell it. And Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
I read that book. It's overrated.
And the Blade Runner book is noticeably a little more. The world is noticeably more screwed. But
Well,
Cyberpunk as a whole. Oh yeah, Neuromancer, I think, or Neurodyne.
Neuromancer was the big one. Gibson, it was always Gibson that was the big one.
Yeah, because Neuromancer
Neuromancer,
came out, and then there was John. I think Johnny Mnemonic came after Shadowrun, though.
yeah, but there's actually a reference to a character that's a lot like Johnny Mnemonic in Shadowrun lore, but that's like one of those weird things. Anyway, so the first thing that kind of Shadowrun does as a setting is it basically says, the world as it was, fuck that shit. We're blowing it all up. Like, neo-Soviets are back, baby.
You blew
There's
it
this
all
whole
up,
thing.
you maniacs.
So, like, the United States has a couple of major decisions. Like, there's a Supreme Court case that grants extraterritoriality to a Japanese corporation, because this is back at the time when, like, they're looking at the Japanese economy going, like, high, and be like,
Oh yes,
Japanese are...
the long business scam of Japan.
Yeah.
That only crashed around was it the 90s?
Opening of the 90s is when that sort of hit a fucking brick wall, as basically all the loans and all the money moving and the stock activity collapsed. But yeah, so that's one of it. The second bit of it is that there's a fucking crazy racist man that takes over the United States because of the Vitas epidemic. And also, the Native Americans are suddenly discovered to be on some of the world's largest examples of oil, so we try to confiscate that, as of course you would do.
A little bit
So there's
of
a bunch
a
of...
little bit of nods of what actually happens later on in history, which is
Well,
surprisingly predictive, but it makes sense because there's a lot of oil and natural gas when you get up through the north, where there's a lot of natives.
there is, but there isn't. Like, I'm in an area around all these reservations, and I understand completely why the tribes are very, very mad about having an oil pipeline go right next to their only source of water,
Oh yeah,
because they're the ones
you
footing
need-
the bill if that thing leaks.
yeah.
Because nobody's gonna fucking help them, and they know it.
My
That's the
question
same
is,
reason why
though,
they shut down during all this.
My question is,
Because
though, why did the U.S. give? I think you're talking about the Ranraku Corporation that they did this with.
Shiwaze. Because
Shiwaze?
so Vitas is this big, like, think super Ebola aid COVID thing.
Okay,
It's
so that makes
incredibly
sense
lethal.
because we were over to give you an idea, the current year things that was overdue for like at least 20 to 30 years. We're supposed to
Yeah.
get one of those like
You
every
usually get a
70
big
to
outbreak
90
every
years.
70 to 90. Yeah. There's going to be a big major disease outbreak every 70 to 90 years. It's just part of how human populations work. It also just sort of depends on how lethal it is what affects it. We kind of got lucky. We rolled the dice on something that was incredibly infectious, but not the most lethal. Still more lethal than your average influenza strain, but,
I would say this though, that the ideal entity, the ideal biological agent for those is actually what's going on now, and your influenzas. Because
yeah.
ideally, for a virus to work successfully as a pandemic, you need. Oh man, we're going off topic, but you need it
Let's
to
get back
be
on the Vitas.
just enough to be infective and just lethal enough to be scary.
Yeah.
Vitas is like, from what you're describing, since you described it as Ebola and AIDS, it sounds like a quick burner.
It sort of was, sort of wasn't. There were two waves of it, basically.
Which makes
there was
sense
the first
because,
outbreak.
Hey, they did their research on how pandemics spread.
So they basically said that like 25% of the global population dies, just flat out, to explain some of this. Yeah, again, 80s, but also because they were thinking of
the Black Death.
Black Death
and smallpox.
And smallpox. Yeah, well, smallpox was also a killer than you'd think. It was still incredibly lethal, but once somebody figured out that cowpox was a similar disease and started intentionally infecting people with cowpox to give people a fighting chance against smallpox.
Yes, really vaccines, the greatest discovery of the 17th century ever.
Yes, the funniest thing about that is it was some crazy fucking guy who was looking over his medical notes and is seeing that, whenever I get a milkmaid with smallpox, her symptoms aren't that bad. And so he thinks maybe it has to do something with udders. So he gets a boy and he cuts open the boy's hands and he has him rub a goat on the udders. I'm dead serious.
Yes, the proto-inoculation was very strange.
And then he exposed that small boy to smallpox. Because scientists are fucking monsters sometimes.
Hey, remember, this is the same logic that the guy who I think rolled around in his own fecal matter did to discover how yellow fever spread.
Okay, the guy that discovered yellow fever grabbed every fucking mosquito he could and deliberately got them to bite him.
Don't forget
This
that didn't
man,
he also roll around in like his filth and like drank his own piss and
yes,
stuff
he
like that
tried
too?
stuff like that to see if that also spread it. That guy was a fucking nut job, and God bless him. He died of yellow fever, but he did prove that it was mosquitoes that did it. Like there's these weird
1700 scientific ethics. Hey, thanks for the comment, by the way, because that leads us back to Shadowrun. Because ethics
yes,
and Shadowrun.
ethics basically went out the window because of Vitas in many ways. There's food rights, there's everything like that, and that's where the Supreme Court case comes in, because essentially
The
a
economy.
Shiwase food truck is going to a Shiwase nuclear facility. And there's some terrorist attacks around there, and also the fact is that the Shiwase food truck had some guards on it that opened fire on the crowd. Basically, Shiwase argued that the truck was their property, therefore their property laws extended to that. Therefore, they couldn't be charged under U.S. law. And the Supreme Court fucking agreed with them because the Supreme Court was staffed by basically neocons.
No, that's an insult to
So-
neocons. They were ANCAPs. There was at least two
They-
ANCAPs on there.
There were at least 3 ANCAPs in the Supreme Court, otherwise that would not have flown.
Yeah, because
And
insult them all you will, but neocons, while one or two might have done that because of stupidity, because God, Supreme Court justices, this quality of standards for them are actually pretty easy to be low. Because didn't we once get a schizophrenic man on there for like 30 years?
We once had a man that was part of the KKK.
So, like, the bar is
Mind
not
you,
high.
Mind you, the guy that was once part of the KKK is actually considered one of the best Supreme Court justices of all time, which is weird but here's the reason. His name is Hugo Black, if I remember right. He was one of FDR's appointees, and basically he, like many people at the time, joined the Klan for political reasons.
Oh yeah, the 20s was when they were big, and they were like a pyramid.
The 20s was when they were big, and they were a pyramid scheme. So basically, he associated himself with the name, got elected, never looked left, never looked back.
Yeah.
The
depressing thing is the schizophrenic guy who was on there for like 20 years was only considered middling.
That also reminds me, Taft was a Supreme Court justice at one point.
And he was one of the best ones, actually.
He was okay. I wouldn't call him one of the best. Taft is an interesting character, and we're really getting off topic, but like, Taft is one of my favorite presidents in terms of like, there's so many connections with weird historical events between like Taft and everything else. Like
the
he's
Philippines
the first president
is because of Taft.
The Philippines is because of Taft. Well, he was Governor General of the Philippines for a while.
Yeah.
He also had his boat stolen by Carl Panzram. I'm dead serious. This actually happened because Taft, I think, was one of the judges that sentenced Panzram. So he's got some weird crossovers like that. Then there's his political career in office, which is basically like he's the first president to do like an opening pitch, which is just like one of those weird trivia facts that you pick up. That, yeah, he's the president that started the tradition of every president going to a baseball game in Washington, D.C. and throwing the first pitch to mark the season. That's him. He also...
Didn't he also renovate a good portion of the White House, which was, like, crumbling, too?
Yes, he did. He did massive renovations for the White House. He also installed a massive bathtub, partly because the legend is that he got stuck in it. I'm not 100% certain on that.
It was uncomfortable, and he was a stress eater.
Yes.
Because he did not like being president.
He did not. He kind of only ran for president because he was nominated. Because the nomination process back then was very weird. This is actually how we got James A. Garfield in office, because basically he never wanted to be president, but the fact is that he made a speech about how the nominees were all awful for the party and they shouldn't be voted for.
And he's like, wait, you're picking me? What?
And they started to pick him. And he's like, well, I don't want to run for president. And then like a couple of people went, look, Garfield, look, you're the perfect guy for the job because you don't want the job.
And then he got shot on a Monday, or he died on a Monday.
He got shot then by a guy because Garfield was Garfield's really interesting. I could go into like 3 hours on Garfield because
But
he's
anyway,
just a
in the
very
stream about
to any of this fucking shit about Shadowrun. Jesus, we got on a diatribe. Let's see other weird American presidents. Grover Cleveland, who groomed and married a woman in office.
There's
But
a
also
reason I
had
named this glitches in the system. I think it's a good title for this episode.
yeah, but also the other bit is that like people talk about how politics now is so nasty and down low, and I'm like, no, not really.
Remember
When we
Adams and Jefferson's like
Adams and
newspaper fight,
Jefferson,
the
oh
epic
Jesus
newspaper
Christ,
fight.
the new basically ruined the country because half the amendments to the Constitution were designed to appease the Anti-Federalists, and were left deliberately vague to appease the Anti-Federalists, or were never renovated because the Anti-Federalists, like the Second Amendment, in many ways, is this giant concession to the Anti-Federalists who wanted to have a private militia at all times so that they could overthrow the government if they made them pay taxes, and also so that they could backdoor an army in without having to actually pay for an army. Because
that was more of the second. That was more of the reason, I think.
yeah, the people forget that like this also ties into Shadowrun because Shadowrun's a lot about guns. Okay, let's just explain this real quick. So the basic concept of the well-regulated militia relates to the idea that, at least for a lot of the anti-federalists, was that the population is the militia, is the military, and we can rely on them to fight for a revolution. In reality, that militia was mostly white landowning men who had an investment in the government. Not every man. Because not every man could, of course, afford arms, which is why you had towns with some armories where you would have a rich person bankroll a certain amount of money and funding and therefore be the officer. This system lasted up into the Civil War and was a fucking disaster for the United States and basically every conflict it ever got into. Militia forces were never very effective. They had very wild qualities and weren't always the best trained or disciplined.
Most noted in the Civil War when they were actually called up.
Yes, and the Civil War also is notable for having some of the most batshit politicians ever suddenly get military commands. Like Dan Sickles, who is a human meme, and I recommend you read up on him.
So, since this actually kind of ties into Shadowrun as well, also Matt Jackson, the man who nuked the bank because screw the bank.
Oh, Jackson is one of the worst presidents of all time.
Why is he on is he on money? He shouldn't be.
He shouldn't be. The entire reason he's on money is to appease Southerners who should just fuck off.
Well, if they need like a good Southerner, I imagine you can find some pretty good choices besides Andrew Jackson.
Well, they'd probably want fucking John Calhoun on there. Like, no.
I mean, at the time, probably.
Fuck off. Like, Calhoun can go die in a fire.
Well, I mean, to give you an idea, there's a reason Andrew Jackson said that one of his few regrets is he didn't hang him.
Yeah. Remember, Jackson said that. Fucking Jackson. Anyway, where were we? Right.
So anyway, we were at the time.
Native American terror.
No, we were at the Japanese food truck murdering civilians on American soil, and the ANCAP
getting away with it. Yes. Now, this also related to another. Then there was an incident that Shiwase may or may not have staged at a nuclear facility that they ran in the United States, that then granted them basically the first corporation to be granted extraterritoriality status, basically akin to the East India Company. If you know your history, this is not a good thing.
It's a bad idea.
This is never a good thing. This is a terrible idea.
I'm actually, you know what? I'm curious. Which fictional president, not out of real people, but like, who do you think's the guy that got like 3 or 4 ANCAPs on there to make this decision?
Rockefeller? I have no fucking clue.
I don't think that's an insult to Rockefeller.
Yeah, good point. Rockefeller at least knew that if he bit the hand that feeds, he'd be Ford.
Oh, man.
It'd be Ford.
Henry Ford.
Ford would have done it. 100%.
Well, he's a little too old. Who's that? Is it Roth? No, not Rothbard. Who's the guy that's like head of
Norquist.
The Chicago school? The Chicago school. Those idiots.
Oh my god, I fucking love
one of those
Chicago
idiots
school.
From the Chicago school. They managed to become, or maybe Roger McBride, the guy who owns Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah, there we go. Anyway,
the guy who gave the Libertarian Party their only electoral vote that actually succeeded.
Also, it might be the guys that tried to run that town up in New Hampshire.
That too. So anyway, the worst president, like back in the 50s or 70s, put these guys on there. I'm gonna say 70s.
It was Reagan. It was totally Reagan. I've got too much Alzheimer's to know who I'm voting for.
It's Reagan. Like he wins a third term in like 92.
Yeah, that's the only explanation that makes sense.
So anyway,
Um,
corporations now can own land, which is not great for your country's stability.
it's not only that, but they can enforce their own laws on that land. That's the
Oh
big difference.
yes, Fordlandia, but oh boy.
Yes. Yes. So this means that, well, generally they will toe the line and they will also enforce uh, national laws. They can skirt around them if they want to,
By the way,
which is one
also
of the
see the
reasons.
Hudson Bay Company up in Canada.
The Hudson Bay Company. There's also the South China Sea, not the South China Sea, the South Sea Company, which is the cause of like the world's first massive bubble. Like you think the tulip thing
That
was
was the first bubble, but no, South China
no
Seas is amazing.
the South China Seas is basically a
Didn't
great
that nuke
example of.
Isaac Newton's fortune?
Yes. The South China Sea bubble nuked 25% of Great Britain's economy. Like, the tulip bubble was bad, but the South China Sea bubble was bigger and had a lot more weird interactions with the history of the world than the tulip bubble. Um, Again, we're getting way off topic, but Shadowrun kind of
we're
does
talking
that.
about how corporates now own land, which is
Yes.
a great idea.
So, you remember how I was talking about how the Native Americans had a bunch of, like, oil and stuff on their land and the government was trying to
Or at
seize
the
stuff
very
like
least,
that?
their land is in the way of the pipes to the oil.
Yeah. Well, now they're selling this stuff to the corporations who are enforcing their laws, and there's a bunch of now native terrorist organizations trying to blow up Japanese super corporations because uh, that just be how it do. And they actually managed to get into a nuclear launch facility.
Well, I mean, there's quite a few of them out in the Midwest and Rockies.
Yeah. No, less in the Rockies, more in the Midwest.
Can you not envision like a commander of a missile silo just saying, you know what? I kind of hate
Fuck
that.
it.
I kind of hate that my wife's screwing this Japanese oil man.
Sure, random red feather man.
Okay, random. Okay, Kimasabi,
Sure,
take your fucking
Bob
nukes.
McRedfeather. Here's your nukes.
I could totally see like
And they launched them.
Dakotan dude doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, and they launched them, but nothing happens, and nobody's quite sure why. Well, this is because this is at the exact time that the sixth age becomes a thing.
The Age of Aquarius.
The Age of Aquarius. Da, 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 da. Yeah, no, like this is also around the time when the first dragon is seen, which is Razumo, if I'm remembering correctly, by a passenger train in Japan, or something like that.
Ah, yes, dragons. We'll get into.
There's a bunch of spontaneous transformations into orcs, and people are like goblinization, which is bad because people are panicking because Vitas happened before, so they think it's a new disease again. Also because they're fucking ugly, so nobody really likes that. Because like elf babies are kind of cute, dwarf babies kind of cute, troll babies. Oh Jesus Christ! What the fuck is that thing?
Why don't you love me?
Mama, why don't you love me? No. Yeah. They don't have a fun time of it. And then there's people that just randomly turn into orcs too, because the genome switch gets flipped, basically, by the magic returning. So
imagine how weird it'd be when you wake up and you're just like a big old orc and you're like, what?
You're like, I've gained like 30 pounds of muscle. I have tusks now, and I must become ghetto.
Imagine like realizing after centuries that wait, what? These things were real?
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that every major religion on the planet has a fucking crisis, including the Pope declaring, because there's a new Pope because of Vitas, and he immediately declares goblins signs of the devil and the rapture is imminent style of shit. Which is funny because, he's saying that they're heralds of the apocalypse. He is quickly assassinated and brought away into the basement by other members of the church because at this point, the fact is that magic's real, and magicians don't like it when you say stuff like that.
Also, on top of that, that's a bit of an insult to the Catholic Church, which often shat all over witch hunters, traditionally.
Yes. Actually, it's interesting because the Catholic Church is one of the largest groups of magic users on the planet.
Which makes sense,
in Shadowrun. Christian theurgy is basically calling on the angels to do things for you in terms of their spirits, but also channeling the power or the divine will of God into the world. It's actually quite similar to how, a saint would usually work their magic. So there's actually quite a It's quite an interesting debate, you could say, in Christian circles whether or not magic is evil. Because remember, the Bible only talks about dark magic being evil.
Like
That
contacting the dead.
like
That's why
necromancy
Saul
and
was
things like
damned.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Also, FASA thinks metahumanity evolution works like Pokemon. No, it's more like it's magic.
it's
I
more
ain't gotta explain shit.
yeah,
Combined with
it's kind
like
of it's
werewolfism.
I mean, there's suddenly fucking dragons around, okay? Like, are you really, really going to question shit at this point?
Maybe you
Like,
just eject out of your skin like a cocoon because
that
of
would also
magic.
explain why it was so fucking weird. Imagine having a guy in the subway next to you suddenly turn into a troll, and no longer his pants no longer fit, and his dick's right in your face.
And on top of that, his old skin is where is like in
Is on the
shreds
ground
around
all around him, yeah. And you can start to see why people were fucking panicking.
him, especially since a quarter of them are dead already,
Yeah.
and a bunch of Zaibatsus own like half of half of the U.S. now.
And oh yeah, there's a massive civil war in the United States right now because the Native Americans have somehow achieved tribal unity around magic and have currently decided that Whitey must go.
Well, I mean, it is kind of their fault that the Japanese are taking over their shit.
Yeah, so do this thing called the Great Ghost Dance, which detonates like Yellowstone. Well, almost detonates Yellowstone, and basically they force the United States government into capitulation because we don't know what the fuck magic is yet. We don't know if they can really do this. So they caused the eruption of Mount St. Helens and like Rainier and basically every volcano in the North American continent.
So, well, the West Coast is dead.
Well, the West Coast isn't dead. It's not looking the greatest, and it's basically we can do this again anytime we want. Do you really want to fuck with us? So the Treaty of Denver is signed, which splits basically a bunch of other stuff. A cartel takes over the Mexican government, big surprise, and then becomes a multinational corporation. Also, big surprise. That's where As Technology is born from, and why they control now bigger Mexico with blood magic.
Also, isn't there like
Anyway,
corporate wars down in the Southwest now?
somewhat like there's also the fact that the Pueblos decided to form a corporation of their own, the Pueblo Corporate Council. So you've got like that with the Navajo around there. There's the Utes, which were also sort of there. They get absorbed later on in the fluff. There's the fact is that the United States
I
splits
bet
up
the
even
Paiute
further.
tribes are happy that they're just considered an absorbed tribe client.
Oh yeah, no, they're not happy. There's a lot of tension, but they get Las Vegas, so it's okay. California sort of declares independence because this is fucking nuts. Texas declares independence from. Okay, so let's see. California declares independence because they're cut off from the rest of the nation, basically. Because they're surrounded by the Nan. They're basically on their own. The
And they're on
Japanese are
fire.
moving in, and they're on fire. Fuck this, we're out. Nobody really cares because there's bigger problems.
Their economy's destroyed. Like all those profitable, secondary farms. Not they're
gone.
great. They don't farm staples. They farm like specialized foods. That all got nuked
Yeah,
by the mountain exploding.
yeah, and also the
And
fact
the
that
fires.
25% of the population died. Things like that. And
That helps.
oh yeah,
That
the
doesn't
fact that the Mexicans are trying to invade. There's also that. So
Redeem Aztlan.
Yes. Now this gets weirder, even still. So Canada's also not looking too good since they lost basically all of Western Canada to the natives. All of it. It's all gone.
I'm surprised
Quebec is also independent.
That on the one hand, that's not surprising. On the other hand, I almost I'm curious if the Quebecois actually were delusional enough to demand that they still used Canadian dollar.
I think they did.
I hope the Canadian government told them to fuck off because that's what I would do.
Well, the Canadian government decided at this point that fuck it, we're just joining the United States. There's no reason not to at this point.
I mean, our country's on fire, so why not?
We're on fire, but we're also on fire, and
it's a little
could
weird
be worse.
given that Canada's whole identity is spending an inordinate amount of its budget on trying to prove that they're not American. Not trying to be mean, but
that's part of the reason. That's part of the reason why the Southern United States splits away into a new confederacy, because why not? Aside from Florida, which joins the Caribbean League, because Florida. Well, at least
don't
Southern
mind
Florida.
me. My brain's just trying to process. Okay.
So
California, I can buy. The Western Canada and Quebec, I can buy. Texas, I don't get, and the South,
Texas
I
actually
don't get.
secedes. Texas actually secedes to the South. They sort of lead the charge, and then when the Mexicans come over and say, "Hey, buddy, that's our clay with Aztec blood sorcerers," they kind of lose. So they're like, "Fuck you! You didn't help us enough." They leave. They lose again, then they rejoin, because that's Texas for you. Fucking stupid.
My brain is trying to.
It's stupid lore. I don't even want to get into the Euro Wars. That's a mess of a thing in the setting.
We'll cover that next time. But okay. So the only way I can
Well, actually,
maybe.
no, I need to cover it basically. Great Britain nukes everybody. Institutes a new Lord Protector. The Soviets are back, sort of. Poland
I could
kind of
buy the
gets fucked.
Soviets coming back if Russia gets even
NATO
worse.
kind of dies because of what
yeah.
happened in the United States. But also the fact is that the Euro Wars are what just turn people more towards mercenary companies because they just need men and manpower to fight. So there's like a bunch of these big mercenary units that are founded by like Germany and basically everybody that's not France, because a bunch of French nuclear plants exploded and they're kind of in trouble. And the Russians are coming.
Okay,
The Russians are
anti-nuclear
coming.
nonsense.
Well, because the magic blew them up.
Okay,
basically, there was a
fair
dragon
enough.
that was very mad. Also, because nuclear spirits. Because here's the thing, right? Nuclear power isn't necessarily bad, but nuclear spirits can be because they just don't understand that they're not supposed to be here. Basically, is kind of the thing. The nuclear reaction is not natural, and it's not supposed to be here. So it creates
not
weird.
Natural. Looks at Earth's core. Looks at the sun.
You know what I mean, though, right? Like the uranium. They're basically uranium
Fission's
spirits.
not natural. Looks at carbon-14.
It's metaphysics, okay? It's metaphysics. Don't gotta explain shit. It's metaphysical bullshit. And also so that they can make pollution mages.
I'm not gonna lie. My head's still stuck on the South randomly seceding. My only thinking, my only possible way of thinking was that the U.S. decided to try to.
They looked at Canada. They looked at the South. They looked at the economies and said Canada's probably the better bet.
No. Like, you could kick them out, but I was thinking the only other way I could think of was they did a big gun grab.
They didn't.
Everything
actually.
falling apart.
They did restrictions, but they didn't do like a big gun grab.
And then maybe if you combined that with like a massive amount of corporate buybacks, you could have like this charismatic movement where it's like the government gave up on us and keeps selling us to them Chinese. They're Japanese, Japanese. Like, that's the only way I can understand it.
It was more literally that they wanted a South, the writers, because it's FAFSA, it's the 80s. It's fun.
I'm aware, but a little bit. You still need a little bit of logic with your magic.
most of the Native American nations wouldn't exist, namely the Sioux, because the Sioux is basically the Sioux nation should not exist as it exists. They have no population center. They have no good land to grow with. They have nothing there. And it's still a functional nation, which it just blows my fucking. They're one of the biggest military powers of the continent, which just blows my fucking mind.
Powers.
Because they conscript everybody.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's not gonna save you.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things they talk about, like that they're so badass because they're special forces integrating magic, and it's like, yeah, they were badass in the 2050s, and then by 2060 they're kind of like everybody's doing that, you know. Oh, also the Israelis have super Kabbalah magician special forces Mossad. Why not?
I mean, that does make sense, but they should also still. Why didn't they explode? Because of the Gog and Magog protocols also getting exploded by magic.
Well, they kind of used their nukes on the Middle East during Vitas.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think. Also, most of their nuclear deterrent is actually either aerial dropped or submarine launched. So,
I'm just envisioning the Mediterranean, at least the stuff near the Levant, just being one glowing green area.
It probably was, and nobody really noticed or cared.
Because everyone was too busy turning into orcs or nuking, or the British for no fucking reason.
The British basically did that to stop the first round of the Euro Wars. Because there's like, okay, I need to get into the Euros in the basics at least, right? So basically, Ukraine gets taken over by Russia. They start to move in on Poland. Poland sells its soul to corporations. The corporations don't really back them. They're now on the German border. The German government responds the best way that they know how, which is that they are going to fight to the last fucking man alongside the Czechs and everybody else in Eastern Europe that really doesn't want the Soviets back.
I'm kind of amused that Poland just rolled over, given that.
Poland didn't roll over. Poland fought to the last fucking man.
Good.
They just were sold out by the corporations. Basically, they took their gold reserves and they said, your supplies aren't coming here yet."
FASA writing makes Palladium's rifts more plausible. What the fuck?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. But
also the concept of the Bundeswehr actually being competent kind of makes
they were. There weren't enough of them, because remember, this is 80s Bundeswehr.
Yeah, and there's kind of always a suspicion that if you stay in too long as a volunteer, you're a little bit weird.
Yeah. Well, that's where Met 2000 comes
So
in.
when the British go crazy, is it because the BNP wins and just says screw it?
Nobody really knows. It's one of those great mysteries of the setting.
My headcanon is the BNP wins.
It's called the Nighthawk incident, because they use these stealth bombers to basically nuke a bunch of military bases all over Europe to basically to cease hostilities, basically. Why? Nobody fucking knows why.
I'm surprised they didn't just get nuked back into a fucking crater.
Well, because France at this point is a fucking riot.
Yeah, but the rest of the countries, I think even they would look at it and then just go, no.
Nobody else really in Europe has a credible nuclear deterrent. It's literally just Britain and France.
Wasted theirs.
Yeah, and they might not have. They still have the nuclear submarines. They still have the boomers. You can't take away Jeb's fucking tridents, man.
Fertile Crescents is glowing crescents. It's not even a crescent anymore. It's just desert. Look upon Yine works in despair.
It sort of was, because, well, there was a new caliph for a while, and the new caliph decides that because magic's back and all this is awful, we need to jihad the West, and they took over Turkey, because, of course. I think that this might just be Edragan in an alternate universe.
It probably is.
Probably is. So he declares a new jihad upon Europe. This is part of the reason why the Euro Wars kind of spark into being again, and why the Nighthawk incident is speculated to have happened, is that there was a dragon involvement in it, and it's a fucking mess. Anyway, basically,
and wasn't there a nuclear summer, winters? Whole Europe should be threads. Yeah.
All of Europe is not in a very good state at this point. Mind you, again, the yields of the nukes they used were not very large.
I'm not gonna lie.
The yields they used were not very large, and it was tactical strikes, basically. That's the only reason why there isn't really a nuclear winter. Also, because everybody is fucking going nuts at this point. So the other thing is that this Alliance for Allah, I love the fucking name. It is the dumbest name I've ever heard.
It sounds like an Islamic youth outreach program. Not gonna lie.
They kind of were. Tries to take Israel. Israel basically goes, lol, no, and uses Jewish space magic and lasers to defeat them. I'm not kidding about the space lasers. They had those.
Who'd have thought spirit science was right, and they actually are space aliens from another dimension?
Well, the Jewish magic, they used that, and then they also had space lasers, which also helped. They managed to get Star Wars working. So
I mean, it only took magic.
It only took magic, there we go. Well, actually not magic, because magic doesn't work in space because of reasons.
By the way, is it sad I actually understand Florida splitting for the Caribbean just because of Miami better than everything else?
It was literally only southern Florida, like around Miami, that split away. Because they're like, no way, I'm not going with this.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Although why they would rejoin Cuba, did Cuba become a corporate nightmare again?
Sort of. Yeah, after Castro kicks it.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense then.
So anyway, right. Euro Wars Round 2. Basically the Soviets now are fighting alongside the Europeans to try to hold the jihad out of the Balkans, and Iberia gets pretty fucked up, so does Sicily.
Of course, because did they just look at medieval history maps and go, I want it like that? Oh my god.
And then a dragon gets really pissed at
I like how their desperate excuse for everything is dragon.
Sirog the Destroyer. Well, it's not just that. There's also an assassination of the Caliph, which causes fractures, which causes infighting.
Hey, when
And then
we
a
write
dragon sort
ourselves
of
into a
finishes the job.
stupid corner, we just use stupid nonsense to get ourselves out of it.
Yep. FAFSA writing. I fucking love FAFSA just for this sort of like dumb asshole bullshit. So
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this actually does kind of tie in very well with Battletech in terms of the sheer amount. This one actually seems less brain damaged, though. Than,
it is more brain damage because the Neo-Soviets are still
the
around.
way Europe's handled, yes, but Neo-Soviets actually does make sense because, hey, when you think about when the Soviet Union collapsed and then that kind of nightmare, when the world's going to shit, wouldn't it make a lot of sense to go back to a system where, well, yeah, you had bread lines, but there was always bread at the end of it?
Yeah. Sure, it might take 2 hours to get your bread, but you still got your bread.
Like, that actually makes the most sense out of all the things you described in Europe. By the way, don't mind me, that was just a random French fry viewers.
Yep. So it gets weirder and dumber, right? So Ireland is now unified.
Fair enough, although I imagine a lot of deaths were involved.
Because of elf magic.
Oh no.
I'm dead serious because of elf magic. And there's now a group of Irishmen who don't like the Irish because they're elves now.
Oh no. Oh no.
They're called the Knights of the Red Branch or some shit like that, and they conduct terrorist attacks in like Boston and shit. It's retarded.
God,
why? It gets weirder and dumber. So you know how there's the fucking neuromancer stuff? That also gets hit with a bit of magic. It's called the Matrix. So there's Crash 1.0, which is also what happens during the Euro Wars and what partially kicks the Euro Wars off.
Wasn't Crash 1.0 like in the original fluff? Because I know there's a Crash 2.0.
Yes. There's actually a Crash 3.0 as well, but the thing about Crash 1.0 is that was what kicked off the Euro Wars, started the modern Matrix, and otherwise really fucked with the setting. Once it was rebuilt, you get Deckers and all that, cool 80s. Like I've got a computer, a personal computer. It's the size of a skateboard.
It's like the Yu-Gi-Oh fucking deck.
It's a fucking dual deck, yeah.
Dual deck. Yeah.
Like they literally, like when you're portrayed, they look a lot like dual decks, and they often are slotted onto arms like dual decks. It's fucking dumb, and I love it.
I do like them. Don't people usually complain because Deckers usually take up the whole session when they do things?
Yeah, the Matrix rules in Shadowrun have always been a pain in the fucking ass.
I can fix that for you guys. It's really simple. I thought of it myself. I think I might have stolen it from some guy. But here's the trick to making it not crap. Just, you know how you have protective ice?
Yeah, like
that
black
be
ice.
your party. Your party.
There you go.
Your party characters.
Not all hackers work like that. That's the problem. Is not all hackers work like that, which is
just make it work that way.
Yeah.
I mean, the other method is just do what most people do, where they just kind of abridge it.
They abridge it. They just shorten it because it's a pain in the ass, especially if your Decker wants to do something during combat to help. And the way to solve that is simply say, yeah, he's a rigger now. Just use that. Just use drones.
I mean, there's a reason why Crash 2.0 completely changed how they worked.
Yep. Crash. We're gonna get to Crash 2.0, but so there's the original setting of Shadowrun is 2050, the radical future of 2050, where everything is an 80s metal band cover. People are using random Japanese slang. Well, a little less. This comes more into third.
Okay, so your average embarrassing high school Japanese club.
Yeah, sort of. No, that's.
Your average also awful fan fiction written by a 15-year-old.
There you go.
Oh, by the way, Ireland becomes Thalmor Valenwood?
Basically, yes. Yeah. There's areas you just can't go in Ireland if you're not an elf. Because the island itself will try to fucking murder you. Australia is also in a weird spot. I mean,
I imagine so.
The dream time happens occasionally there.
Oh, that means that there's no past, present, or future, so you're just infinitely screaming.
If you're in the outback, yeah, you can get stuck in the dream time for a while, which is not fun.
Infinite screaming. I think I found my new sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah.
Rainbow Serpent in Shadowrun.
Yeah, that's a thing. It's an extremely powerful spirit in the Australian outback, and nobody wants to go near him because, like, I think even dragons give him a wide berth because he's just like fucking Christ. Then let's get back to 2050. So you've got the fact is that let's get this out of the way. Orcs are black people.
Yeah.
It's an inevitable thing with any sort of setting like this. Orcs become black people.
It's almost like I almost want to blame this setting for that mindset.
It is partially to blame, along with almost every other setting with modern fiction and orcs. It's a natural correlation. A thing that's assumed to be evil but isn't. You get the idea. Also racism, allegories and all that. It's like X-Men. Mutants became black people.
Well, yeah, but then that bombed horribly. Like, people forget the Silver Age run of X-Men bombed like shit.
It bombed, and then they got into the alien stuff, and then it kind of came back.
Yeah. It's almost like trying to use allegories like that.
It works occasionally. Like I think one of the best comics ever done by DC was the one about like Green Lantern, where he had to confront the fact that like, what have you actually done for Earth? Like, you done a lot for the Green Man, but what about the Black Man?
No,
what about the White Man?
That's embarrassing.
I thought it was a great comic.
That fucking page. Like, he's like, you've done a lot for Green Man and Orange Man and Purple Man. And then Hal just looks like 1,000,000% destroyed. That is so embarrassing.
It's embarrassing because it's kind of true.
No, it's embarrassing because it's so fucking ham-handed.
It is, but at the same time, author Strawman has a point. Like,
badly constructed
Strawman has a point. Like, it's a fun one.
The real problem was they had a weird racist man. Because remember, they also had that one Super Justice League of Children, and until 1980s, he refused to have any black people on there. The only time he did, he had to be a radical racial segregationist, where all the black people are exiled to this one island that's magical and vanishes randomly.
I forgot about that.
Like to give you an idea, half the reason that book was probably so embarrassing was because it had to pass through that guy.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't until like the early 80s when he got finally booted that,
yeah.
Things were written better.
I mean, Static Shock handled it really well. Remember the Static Shock TV series?
That was
a fucking good TV series. Like, that's the show that handled AIDS, dyslexia, disabilities, school shootings, homelessness, mental illness, racism. It handled all of that in a kid-friendly manner with superheroes where you didn't even realize what they were talking about. And then you look back and you're like, oh my god, that's what they were going on about. Like the one fucking school shooter kid, the Ricky.
Yeah.
Where they're even talking about like how often this sort of stuff goes, where it's like, if you got a friend that's talking about doing stuff like this, tell an adult. And things like that.
Oh, they also had like pure brainlessness, like the time Shaquille O'Neal appears on it.
That was amazing. I will hear nothing wrong about that episode.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just highlighting that for every serious episode, there was like a couple that weren't.
Yeah, like
and actually, Dakota City kind of feels like you could maybe not quite Shadowrun, but it kind of has shades of that. More mutants and masterminds, though.
It feels like your average Midwestern city is the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it. Like people forget like that.
Just with super science and genetic manipulation.
Yeah, and the I also liked the fact that they did have a way to get the sidekick character in there that wasn't retarded, right?
Yeah, it just slowly evolved and mutated.
He basically, like, Richie, the whole thing with Richie getting the Bing baby powers for like the super intelligence was that he was exposed over time to all of the clothes that Static was wearing, so he got a big huff of that gas, but in like a less concentrated way.
And that's why
the mutation wasn't as severe.
And that's why his tech started like garbage, but then got better as he went along.
Because it was a slow dose, basically, which is really fucking clever.
So anyway, let's get back to
Let's get back to
ham-handed reason why.
Ham-handed racial metaphors.
Also why orcs nowadays are, the ravenous, violent monsters of fantasy are now equated to black people, thus proving people who make that analogy are really, really effing racist.
They're either
Without
really
knowing
effing racist, or they're just kind of not
Completely
quite getting the
clueless.
idea. Yeah, or they're clueless. Like, I don't like to ascribe to racism what I can describe to just people being retards.
I think it's just more accident. It's either accidental, like they don't know,
Yeah.
or they actually do feel that, but they don't know it.
Or it's because the fact is that orcs have been used as the analog for black people by some really racist people in the past.
It's funny
And
because they're racist against. They're racist against the Chinaman. If anything, if anything.
I'm sorry. I forget that Tolkien was a little.
Well, no, even he went like, oh, I kind of regret making orcs completely evil because they were elves. They were elves.
He mentions in his letters that there were orcs that fought against Sauron. There were actually a sizable contingent of them that did fight against Sauron because they're like, this is some fucking bullshit, man.
Just like how there were evil dwarves who worked with orcs. At least, like Sauron's orcs.
Or there was the men that fought for Sauron too. Like, the point being.
And while there were entire tribes of Easterlings, he didn't.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway,
back to horrible,
Tolkien. Back to smashing Tolkien into cyberpunk and seeing what happens.
The ghettos are now very orky.
The ghettos are now very orky because, well, they're ugly and nobody likes them. Oh god damn it! I'm not racist, I swear. I have like one orc friend.
Green lives matter.
Green. Orcs and Shadowrun don't actually. Their skin tones are not any different than average human skin tones.
They just got
aside from like the Japanese oni, but like that's a. There's a reason why the Japanese are incredibly racist is because they're incredibly racist in reality.
Yeah.
But also because the Japanese variants of metahumans are kind of, well, they look like fucking demons, man.
Yeah.
Like they look like fucking yokai. It's just there's no two bones about it.
I like how it's only Japanese variants that get that way.
Well, there's also like some in India. There's like the giants in Scandinavia who are just trolls but bigger, and they have like bark-like skin instead of like the weird kind of bony stuff that the normal trolls have. Then there's cyclopses as well in Greece, along with minotaurs, which are just people with horns. Yeah.
But yet the Japanese ones are magically exactly the same.
Well, they have a bunch of very bright, distinctive skin colors, and like Japanese dwarves are also different too. And so I fucking love the meta variant for Hawaiian dwarves, where they become the little hairy guys from like Polynesian mythology that like surf and all that shit.
That's actually clever.
Yeah.
It feels like they only gave a shit for Japan when they did this.
Well, Shadowrun actually was a small hit in Japan. It's weird, but that's why there's like some art floating around for like 4th edition of like play guides and things for that, because the Japanese RPG market is very weird and very divorced from anything in the United States. It's sort of one of the reasons why like Magic took off like a rocket there to a degree. Like they like Magic the Gathering, but they don't like tabletop war games at all. They just don't. There's like weird stuff like that.
That makes a little more sense on why they specialized a little more there. It's kind of like why Chicago by Night's so big.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because again, it's just actually Germany also. Well, part of it's Germany has like a big Shadowrun community because Shadowrun was one of the few books that was translated to German in the RPG market at the time.
Yeah. I mean, Germany. The only other option was like the Dark Eye, which maybe we'll talk about that at some point.
Also, because
I have a copy of the Dark Eye translated.
FAFSA was partially owned or had like investment from a German company, a German publisher, which also helped quite a bit for them. That's why like all of the That's what there's were some German specific book releases like for Berlin, which is basically like a weird anarcho thing. That's the other big thing about Shadowrun is that Shadowrun has a lot of, well, of course, cyberpunk anarchism, but also like neo-anarchism, which is basically like we just don't like the corporations. We want to get a return back to what was, not what is.
That's not really
And
neo-anarchism, though.
it sort of is because they want to go back to sort of like the idea of we don't want the corporate control. We don't want the state control. We also don't want, but we really don't want the corporate control, and that's
Okay.
their main objective.
That's just anti-corporatism.
Yeah, but that sort of became neo-anarchism in this setting.
So anyway, I know you've been avoiding it, but back to the orc ghettos.
Back to the orc ghettos. The mayor of Seattle, also the governor of Seattle, because Seattle becomes a state and a city.
And
Because
that's
Seattle
mainly
is,
because that's the main that's the main city setting.
it's the only port for the United States on the Pacific now. It's just the area around Seattle, which they kept because of the nuclear bases there, and from the Treaty of Denver, because
Translation: it's because it's the main city setting.
yeah,
for the
because
first
it's the
few
main
books.
city setting for the first few books. It's also because Seattle just fits cyberpunk very well because it's often very rainy. It's got like high-rise buildings. It's got the Space Needle. A lot of fun. And it's also got it's always had a connection with anarchist and just anti-government groups. So there you go. I actually knew one of my guys that I talked to was actually nearby the Chaz during its entire thing. He said he went to go get tacos in there every time, never felt danger at all. Just one of those weird situations where it's like most of the locals were just kind of like, like it's there, which is the same thing with everybody everywhere. It's like, oh, this happened. It's sort of like having a construction project in an area. You just sort of shrug and you move on.
I'm just going to point to the quadrupled murder rate and then move on.
Yeah.
Let's not and move on. So anyway, the mayor of Seattle hates orcs, I guess.
Yeah, Governor Brackhaven, who also is
Makes a lot of sense given Seattle has a racial problem history.
Yeah.
All of the Northwest does actually.
Yeah.
Kind of the same problem with like how New Englanders are usually the ones that they like to talk about how they totally support those of lesser need. But the moment they run into them, that snooty arrogance kind of comes in and it's like, oh, get away from me, weirdo. You're going to try to attack me.
Says the New Englander.
And the Northwesterner.
Yeah.
Only they're a little less refined
Open about it?
Well, yeah, a little less open and not as prone to white trash outbursts because let me tell you, a lot of New Englanders forget that there's a reason why hillbillies also went as far as the what was it, the
Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania. No, they went up as far north as Maine, dude. Lovecraft country is banjos too, just so you know. So anyway, the mayor of Seattle hates orcs a lot.
Yeah, governor of Seattle also. But,
it depends on what hat he chose to wear.
He's also an adopted kid that isn't. There's a lot of weird shit because of the meta plot, basically. Shadowrun is a very much an example of its times where FAFSA has a meta plot and they go along it.
And meta plots to me, well, I've made my opinion clear.
Yeah, which got us to like the fact that there's a lot of debate over like what was good, what wasn't, what about Catalyst, what about WizKids, what about all this sort of stuff.
Let's just say that there's a reason why I'm planning on eventually running a Cyberpunk game, but it's going to be like Cyberpunk Lowville.
Yeah,
because Louisville, Kentucky has a lot of interesting stuff you can do with it.
Louisville, Kentucky, the Twin Cities have always been interesting in terms of like the weird mix of like the fact that the cops are kind of always have been a corporation, weirdly. There's also a lot of links to organized crime all up and down the Mississippi.
Also, Cyberpunk San Francisco is fun just because
Cyberpunk New Orleans. Cyberpunk New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean it's basically a dumpster fire. You could even do like I did this with San Francisco as my original pitch, but New Orleans kind of does it better. You can do it kind of like RoboCop's Detroit, where the city itself is basically
that reminds
dead.
me about Shadowrun. They nuked Chicago because of bug spirits, which is the other big meta plot thing, because they're trying to tie this game in with another game. we have to talk about what was it, Earth Dawn, I think. It existed. Let's move on.
This is the tie-in. Is like, hey, did you like Shadowrun? Well, buy this bug book.
Buy this book about the past age, but the selling point of Shadowrun has always been the high-tech mix with the magic.
Yeah, it's Magitech.
Yeah, and
Magitech
also,
Cyberpunk, which you don't
yeah,
get.
which is very unique, and despite the fact that nobody plays dwarves, I have not met a single person who unironically plays dwarves.
My experience, it's usually either humans,
It's
elves,
humans, elves,
or
trolls, or orcs
trolls or orcs.
because dwarves have the one of the worst stat lines terms of like you have to invest into them and they make your character actually worse at combat. You still have to pay extra for gear. They're worse at combat because they have lower reaction speed, and in Shadowrun reaction speed is king because of the initiative passes in the initiative system.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to play them.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Yep. Mind you, they can make decent mages, but that reaction is still going to hurt them.
Who'd have thought that? Who'd have thought that a system that has a lot of guns and first response wins, you need reaction
Yeah,
time, or just a
basically.
fuckload of health.
Yeah, I mean dwarves are tougher slightly too, but like they're not as tough as orcs or trolls. They're not as
Because
fast.
when I think of
They're not as
Shadowrun,
agile.
what I'm envisioning, there's a couple things I envision. There is the human decker with the Yu-Gi-Oh deck, card deck,
It's just
and the
Seto Kaiba.
visors. And he has like the digivisors to talk to like the sprites.
Yeah.
And then you have the 9 foot tall, covered in Sherman tank armor troll with a fucking 20 millimeter minigun in one hand and a giant flamethrower in the other.
Yeah.
And then like for elves, I usually envision either a mage or like an adept. It's one or the other. And then you got drone bomb rigger.
Yeah.
That's what I think of. I don't think of trolls usually. No, not trolls. Or dwarves. I actually forgot the name of the creature because that's how often they appear in Shadowrun in my brain.
Yep. They're special because it's like, well, why would you play a dwarf when you could play almost anything else and it'd be better statistically, and also just like it's easier for you to live because dwarves have the same problem that trolls do, where you have to pay extra for your gear because
Yeah.
you're smaller.
Yeah, but with trolls it's worth it because then you can just
Trolls
fucking
can just
look and
tank.
laugh. Yeah.
Trolls are not very great at mental stuff, but it's like you're a giant. You're a fucking troll, right? You're huge. Mind you, you can do a troll. You can do a troll like
I'm envisioning a troll decker and it's great.
a troll decker. It's I would not really go for it 100%, but you could definitely do like a troll wizard pretty decently.
I just think Troll Deck would be hilarious just because you can
It
even
would
do
be,
the
yeah.
double parody where it's like you fucking break apart the company's security and then you just leave a literal troll face and go problem.
Yeah. They're just statistically not as great at it.
I think there's also playable shapeshifters, at least like that Kitsune
Yes,
in the
there
SNES
are.
game.
Okay, you can actually play a Sasquatch, which I'm surprised that I've never had somebody be interested in playing a Sasquatch because that actually sounds really fun.
Yeah, especially since the one thing I remember about Sasquatch is there's a great Shadowrun Storytime series that actually goes into one of the missions, which involves like a small,
Sasquatch Island, yeah.
yeah, Sasquatch Island.
And the other thing is that Sasquatches they can't speak and they can't do Decker stuff, but they're dual natured, so they can interact with spirits. They can do magical stuff easier that way. They're just as strong and tough as trolls, but they are intelligent, more intelligent.
So that's an interesting pick that I've never seen anyone actually do. You're right. I've never
And
seen anyone do that.
they're also more charismatic. So you can do a one of my favorite ones with this was that somebody made a point where you can do a Sasquatch rock musician that's also a mage really, really well. Like that's just what they do.
I'm just envisioning.
Just imagine thrash metal Sasquatch, where it's just Bigfoot noises.
That's pretty good, but I was thinking because 80s also had some weird artsy stuff. Um,
Oh
you
my
know that guy
god.
who broke away from the Eagles. I think his name's
Yeah.
Don Henley. Didn't he, remember that one weird minute where he got some guy to play the Uillean pipes for that album of his?
Yeah.
Just
I'm also
imagine like a
imagining like
Sasquatch playing
I'm
that.
imagining a Sasquatch with like a guitar.
That'd be great.
Or like a synthesizer Sasquatch, like a fucking imagine techno Sasquatch.
I'm envisioning him dressed like Skrillex.
Yes. Or like Daft Punk. That'd be amazing.
Daft Punk Sasquatch, where it's like his own roar noises, but then it's digitized and he's like
It's mixed around. Yeah.
dubstep Sasquatch noises.
Dubstep Sasquatch. Yes.
Well, I think I came up with a potential
Here's
character I
Bigfoot
run.
peeking out from behind a bush. He's got like a bunch of old fucking Art Bell clips of Bigfoot just on cue. Yeah, well, we're just gonna talk about Sasquatch's dick now, and it's just like stuff like that.
His first album is just like that famous fake.
It's the Patterson Gimlin footage, but it's him.
Yeah. Like the album is just like famous Bigfoot photos, but it's him in them instead.
Yeah.
I actually like that's a great NPC. To the 3 people and sometimes 4 that watch, you could take that and run with it. I'm okay with it. I love this
That's
idea.
amazing. Yeah. Another one with that is that there's some other like meta variants that just nobody plays, like Naga, because they have no arms, and I don't know how you'd play them.
We don't need arms where we're going.
Because they're like people, they're like snakes with people faces.
Get robo arms.
They sort of can't because they're magical dual-natured creatures. They can't interact with technology like that.
That is
That's
unfortunate.
the downside of Sasquatches, for example. Sasquatches cannot take implants. They can't BioWare, so you have to make them adepts or you're not going to get as much out of them. But that's fine, because imagining Bigfoot, but like also supernaturally strong and fast Bigfoot is really great.
Rocking out on the Uillean pipes.
He's got like a fucking Peruvian pan flute pipe.
Either that or the synthesizer.
The synth tar.
The synth tar, and he's wearing.
Or he's got
a
power glove. Of course, he's got a power glove.
You know, actually, just for those curious, since I am brewing a cyberpunk, I'm thinking of having the power glove as an actual taser weapon in cyberpunk. Like Nintendo still produces like virtualware, but they have a small line of like security weapons now.
Yeah.
So they have the zap, the light pistol too.
Yeah. Now that said, I think the 2050 setting is possibly the one more famous right now because of Shadowrun Returns and Dragonfall and all that.
Yep.
It's the classic. Is
that also around the time? Because I do have a module called the Ranraku Arcology Incident.
That one's a little bit later. That one's around 2060s, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that one was always
Crash
interesting.
2.0. That's Crash 2.0. Basically, Renraku sets up an arcology where they have a rogue AI that causes Crash 2.0, basically.
Not Showdown.
Also, what causes Crash 2.0 is Viking terrorists who think that the Matrix is the tool of Loki. Therefore, they need to bomb the Panama Canal.
How does that destroy the internet?
Well, they also like go and bomb a bunch of other Matrix hubs and try to take it all down, combined with the AI doing his masterful try to take over the world plan.
Yeah, that would do it.
It's a dumb storyline, but it gets us to 4th edition, which honestly is probably the best edition in terms of fluff.
Well, not just fluff, but also in terms of making Deckers usable.
They made them too usable is part of the problem.
Yeah.
The main problem that 4th had was anybody could jump into decking. You didn't need a dedicated rigger or a decker, which people were mad about. Also, they introduced technomancers, which people were mad about, despite them being just otaku from 3rd edition, but fully fleshed out and updated, and now basically people with matrix brains. They're matrix mages. There you go.
They internet through their head. They don't need the cyberware.
Yeah, they don't need wear. They don't need any of that. And again, people were not exactly the happiest with it.
This
and I
feel like
getting
enraged at like sorcerers existing compared to wizards or something.
Because Faf's grognards. I need to stress this. FAFSA has attracted some of the most hardcore fan bases in all of tabletop gaming. Look at BattleTech, right? Look at the fucking rape that WizKids did to that setting, and there are still people that 100% jumped on kickstarting a project for it. That dumped tens of thousands of dollars into it.
Into WizKids?
Into just a BattleTech property. Like when they announced the Clan Invasion box set, they broke their first stretch goal in like 2 days. Like, it was insane.
Oh, that sounds like me when I was pleasantly surprised at the John Carter RPG
Yeah.
overdoing its funding in one day. I was like,
Yeah.
really? Really? I thought only boomers and kids who were raised by them like me fucking cared enough.
Well, I just think
It
John
was sweet.
Carpenter is classic cheesy.
If you
space
love
action,
swords
but-
and sorcery, it's great. Look at
Yeah.
BTG for grognards.
Yeah, BattleTech General. Holy fuck, there's some grognards there. There's some. I played this game back in the day. It reminds me, my cousin who's in the. Well, he's like a second cousin. He's in the army. He flies helicopters. He was one of the guys that he saw me. I was at a funeral and I had a book at the reception afterwards, and I was reading it. It was the Mechanicum book from the Horus Heresy series. And he saw me and he's like, "Oh, is that 40K?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, I played that back in the day when it was first edition. I bought an army and I painted it up." And
Ah, yes, Rogue Trader, which was a lot goofier and more lighthearted.
he kind of dropped out around third edition because he's like, "Well, I ran to the point where the problem with 40K is you have the money to play. You either have the time to paint and play it, or you have the money to paint it, or you have the money to buy it. One or the other." And I got old enough where I didn't have the time.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Crash 2.0 happens, and that's when you get your
Crash
4th
2.0
edition.
is 4th edition, and honestly, I think the 4th edition is the best terms of like balanced crunch fluff because it introduces like actually technological updates to the setting. First off, deckers are kind of out of the picture now. Like, the deck as a concept kind of died because
Well, the
this was
old
written
network
around.
kind of broke.
Yeah, it's also because they introduced the concept of the wireless matrix again.
Mainly because of advancements in technology.
Because of advancements in technology from the time that third edition was written in the 90s to
Sci-fi's bane.
2006 or 2007.
There's a reason I call this sci-fi's bane. This
Yeah.
is why. This is why I honestly think if you ever do a sci-fi series, you're kind of dumb if you want to try to make a prequel.
Yeah.
No offense, but kind of dumb.
Yeah. So the wireless matrix allowed, essentially, it changed the idea from you have a deck to there were always kind of comlink phones in cyber and like Shadowrun. Now those are also your personal computers because remember, this is around the time of the iPhone and Apple revolution, like the Blackberries and stuff like that.
Ah, yes, the Steve Jobs hack fraud revolution.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, like the concept. And then the writers and the designers at Catalyst, I think, was the one that had the license at the time, went, "This is great, let's go for it."
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have miniature computers, you don't need the Yu-Gi-Oh deck anymore.
You don't
And
need
I
it
think they
anymore.
still existed, but they're like
They
considered
still
retro
existed,
tech.
but they were retro basically. And
I'm just now envisioning some
part of the problem
hipster.
with
Oh
tradition-
God, I just realized you can come up with a stupid NPC. I think they probably did, where it's like a band of grognard deckers who refuse
that's actually
to,
like a great contact to have as a decker or a hacker.
like, imagine this like 60-year-old like actual fucking boomer who talks about doing things old school.
Yeah, this is the problem with 5th edition in my head. Basically, is that they had to make an excuse to bring decks back, and it was a really dumb excuse that ruined the whole point of the wireless matrix.
Oh no.
Like, the thing is, the wireless matrix also opened up the fact that hackers are now much more important, because with the wireless matrix, you don't need a smart link to be wired into your body anymore.
Which is,
Anybody can hack that.
and on top
Anybody
of that,
can hack your cyberware. Anybody can hack all this other shit that's in the world at a fly, which makes it much more viable and interesting to play a decker, because you don't just have to sit back anymore. You can actually interact with the party on the fly.
and on top of that, well, now corporations have to put a lot of money into OPSEC.
Yes, there's also that sort of stuff going on. And then they also
Like,
said like nanotechnology is starting to take off to a degree.
actually,
With
here's an
manufacturing.
even like you can even have an interesting run where it's like you bring in, you're thinking Mr. Johnson's like, oh, we're gonna have him try to, I need you to hack into this mainframe, and then it turns out no, this was him hiring you as white hat hackers to test their
Yep.
mainframes, but he just doesn't tell you.
Yep. They also talk a bit about like stuff like that everything that's super important is still probably on the grid. Like they still probably don't have it wirelessly active. So you still have reasons for Decker for like a hacker to be with the party, which was part of the reason why Deckers existed in the first place, which was that they have to plug in manually and all that.
To use
Because
the Boomer Decker
this is
idea,
the
I can see it now. They have to deal with an old system, and they're like, "Oh, it's like so archaic. Why do they still use it? Because it's internally closed. It's a lot harder to get in." And then you get the old guy just cracking his knuckles, and that's why
yeah.
sometimes you got to do things old
Do the
school.
real
And he
fast.
pulls out the
He puts
Yu-Gi-Oh card deck.
yeah with a sound. It's time to deck.
I actually like
But
the
yeah,
I actually like the Boomer Deck idea. It's actually pretty fun.
that's one of the things where I'm like, the again, people were complaining with fourth edition that you could have a hacker on the other side of the world as part of your party and never get involved in anything. I'm like, well, because your
Well,
GM's
there's
stupid and
also
puts
shield.
everything
Oh,
in
there's
wireless.
shielding. I mean, wireless has a distance.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing with the wireless matrix is you could also hop between nodes faster and things like that. I think it's a great concept that they kind of neutered in fifth because they wanted to bring back the aesthetic of Deckers without actually explaining why beyond ass pulls.
I mean, my
Same
ass
thing
pull
with
is
what they
just
wanted to get rid of
corporate use.
nanotechnology.
Well, I mean, the
Like
good ass pull would just be some bigger companies realize it's better to use the old software because
that's sort of the one that they went with to a degree, but the reason the justification was because of Crash 3.0.
oh no.
Yeah, which was caused by weird matrix ghosts in nanotechnology infecting people's minds because reasons. Um, and this also caused the collapse of one of the big 10 corporations of fourth edition, which I think was actually kind of the sweet spot of megacorps is around 10, where it's like you've got a bunch of different options from a bunch of different corporations, and they're sort of trying to replace them with Johnny Spinrad's stuff. And I'm kind of like, okay, not really interested. Sixth
Johnny
edition is
Spinrat
also a
stuff.
mechanical. Yeah, fifth edition. Okay, here's the thing. Fifth edition, when it started out, was a fucking mess because of how they scaled things around and how their character creation was. Later on, it got better, at least crunch wise. Fluff wise, it was still a fucking mess. Um, but I did like their crunch eventually. It definitely wasn't as solidly tight as fourths, but there was
Like, I'll legit admit, dude, I don't like what I don't know anything about fifth. So what?
fifth's changes basically were deckers are much more streamlined. I 100% found that they made the matrix rules much more understandable. They had to dumb them down quite a bit, but that was probably for the best. The problem is they also did it with the decker. They brought back the decker bullshit with that, which was just sort of like, okay,
Gotta hack in, and now I gotta. Oh no, there's the ice. I gotta crack
the
through it. Oh no. Oh, I'm
the other
sorry I ate
problem
up an hour of your time, guys, but I had to open that door.
the other problem was that they had magic was just too powerful.
Oops, they
This
pulled
is
a
because they
3.5.
scaled. Yeah, they scaled the cost of cyberware way too high, which basically meant that if you were trying to run a cybernetic person, you were just going to be at a disadvantage from the get-go because you needed to make money, and you needed money to do that. So the best way to actually make money as a starting Shadowrun crew was just to turn your decker in and sell his deck for cash, because that was the most expensive thing of gear probably in the entire group. Because because deckers starting deckers became useless, basically, was the other problem
Oh, that's
because of how
terrible.
they scaled the cost tech. Yeah,
That's terrible.
there was a lot of issues with how they scaled the costs. I wouldn't say it was the worst edition of Shadowrun. I still say that's sixth, but that's because sixth got rid of all the fun crunch from Shadowrun,
Oh
like all
no.
the weird weapon table stuff, and
Oh.
that was always the fun of Shadowrun, was that you could take a random gun and turn it into something completely monstrous. You know? Like there was a lot more weapons customization, and maybe they're going to bring it back eventually for sixth, but sixth also has other mechanical issues with it that I'm just sort of like, eh.
So what you're saying is third or fourth edition, preferably fourth if you don't want to deal with the old school deckers.
Yeah, fifth is also fine. Fifth has grown on me the more I've looked through it.
Are you sure it's not like a situation where you were in the pain glove for like a week or something? And just by comparison, after playing sixth, it's like, well, getting kicked in the face, yeah, that sucked, but it's not like doing this root canal without the Novocaine. Yeah, so by comparison, getting kicked in the face is pretty sweet. Sure, it's
Yeah,
not a case of that.
uh, maybe.
All I do know is that all I do know is maybe they went to hardcore to write their fluff because I that's another thing I really like about Shadowrun is you have different scales of quality for services,
You do,
and I
and
love
they
that
they
part.
do stress how the segmented cyberpunk reality is, and I the one of the things I'll give for fifth edition is some of their fluff writing is excellent. Some of it's really excellent. With like explaining how is food like a big issue in the sixth world. They go into a big discussion about food corps and like the reason why everything is like soy and all this is because not only is it cheap, but when you've got as many people as you do on the planet without as much growable land because of all the disasters, you go into different things and looking around. Like raising beef cattle is just not economically viable
But it is
anymore.
viable. Witchetty grubs.
What is? Yeah. Also
Witchetty grubs.
krill.
Yeah. Krill.
Krill is one of their big ones. Aquaculture is a huge thing in Shadowrun.
Well, yeah, because then you can also combine it with hydroponics.
Yes. It's
So
they
double
they even
stack.
talk about like how like some of the corporations also do stuff like growing crops in space and exporting them to the surface because it's easier to do that
Now that's
for
it's a little bit dumb, but space
it's easier
crops
to
is
do that
fun.
for yeah, it's easier to do that for certain crops than it is on Earth because it's more reliable year round. Um, and also there's the novelty factor of I'm eating a
A
space
space
cookie,
turnip.
like or a space carrots or whatever.
Now the true princely is is turnips grown on Martian soil. The highly alkalinic radioactive soil of Mars.
Yeah, they're not really on Mars
I know, I'm
much.
just highlighting.
Eh, but the real problem
Hilariously,
with
the
fifth edition,
moon's dust is actually more kind to the plants, but it's still not great.
yeah, the main problem with fifth edition into sixth edition and well fourth into fifth is that they basically blew so much stuff up that they had to piece together a bunch of plot threads they'd created that weren't going anywhere anymore because of how they blew shit up.
Because they want
So
to change for change's sake.
yeah,
And that's why meta plots to me don't
metaplots can be
usually work.
absolutely fucking retarded.
They don't work for me because the thing is eventually they're gonna snort too much crack and drive off the bridge and horribly break their bones.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's just I've never seen an arcing meta plot that ends successfully besides arguably the old World of Darkness. And even then,
yeah,
like the whole reason I kind of liked it wasn't because of the ticking death clock, but just because of the setting. Like I don't want this doom clock. Why do people keep doing that?
yeah,
But anyway, I do like that in Shadowrun you actually can come up with like set certain payment plans.
yeah.
Like
Honestly,
there's settings for food, there's settings for shelter, location, district, security, and
there's
obviously dock wagon, which is a big element
yeah
because your
they there
protection plan for that's
there's a
fun.
fifth edition book that actually goes detail into how Doc Wagon actually works as a company, which is quite interesting. But again, it's fifth edition where like the fluff and the crunch can be completely divorced and retarded at times. Uh, fourth edition, don't get me wrong, fourth edition also had some terrible fucking books, but fifth edition has the biggest issue with
Disagree with what, by the way, person on stream?
Well, I didn't actually get the stream open.
No, I've had it open the entire time.
No, on my end.
Just make sure you don't listen to yourself because it does mess with your train of thought. But no, that's a thing I really liked about Shadowrun that Cyberpunk didn't quite do as often is you had tables for certain quality. Like if you wanted to cheap out, this is what you would get, and this is your expected wait time and things like that. There's just something about that I kind of enjoyed because you can actually come up with pretty elaborate settingscapes as just on a DM's point of view. And as a player base, you can actually kind of figure out, okay, so what do we skimp on and what do we not skimp on?
Yeah.
Because if you like cheap out on Dogwagon, well, yeah, they'll come to bail your ass out, but only
Yeah,
if
but
everyone else
no.
is only after everything's quiet. But if you actually
Yeah.
pay some premiums, they'll actually come in and bail you
They
out.
they talk a lot about it in like some of the books about like, okay, so how do you actually evade the cops, right? Like you one of the best ways they say is you jump in between corporate entities, basically. Corporate complexes throughout the city because the corporation that controls the police, which is usually like Lone Star or Knight Errant or whatever, has to have negotiations with those places to be able to go through them to do that sort of thing. So because it's extraterritoriality, so they might be able to you might be able to delay the cops by a couple of minutes as they get the clearance to go through.
That's
You
pretty
know,
cool too.
they talk a lot about like weird wonky stuff like that, which I think is to the benefit of the setting, but it
Oh,
also makes playing it a little bit harder.
also, that's okay. So,
Old World End Times isn't very fun. It's got even worse since they brought it back.
well, fifth V5, I can complain a lot about that edition.
V5 has issues. It's basically because it was delayed for so long. It went through development hell.
Well, not only is it delayed so long, they both wanted to wipe the slate clean, kind of, because a lot
There
of
were a lot
players
of
enjoyed
compete.
first edition, like say Vampire, because it was so clean and open.
Well, that's the thing. That's why V20 was a thing, right? And part of the problem is they wanted to create another edition without creating something that was just V20 again, right? Which is part of the issue they had. They
Change
they
for
were running
change's
into,
sake, yeah.
yeah, because there's a lot of concepts that were thrown in there that were going to be originally parts of something completely different that then ended up in here, which also ended up there, which then makes something else happen. It's just a mess. And there's some great ideas, right? There's some absolutely great fucking ideas in fifth edition. Like the hunger skill is great. I like the idea of it. It makes actually like it makes you not have to always play the vampire superhero sort of bullshit, right? The problem is that it has some other issues mechanically
It's
that
a
they
bright fleck of gold and a giant nugget of shit. I know.
well, it's also that some of the fluff justifications for it are also kind of problematic because they wanted to do Requiem without saying it's Requiem. I guess is the best way to put it,
Yeah,
right?
but if I want to
Because
play
the
Requiem, I'd play Requiem.
yeah,
And
and of
and
course
I'd
all
get
the
both
old
first and
bags.
second edition. That's my only complaint with Requiem. They should have like a
Yeah,
definitive where they
no,
kit bash the first edition's fluff with the second edition's mechanics.
okay. So let me get it to this, right? So V5 is so the original Requiem release is basically we don't want to be constrained by the meta plot anymore. The company going, we don't want to be constrained by the meta plot anymore. We want to update the mechanical system, and we want to try something new to better fit the uh mechanics, right? We want to do something that's not going to be just dumbass shit when it comes to meta plot. We want to get rid of the meta plot. We want to reset stuff, but we don't want to redo the same things we did before, right?
So change the system, tweak it, because every edition they do this just to make it different and worth buying.
Yeah. And that's one of the best things about V5, not V5, about Requiem is that they offer you everything that you wanted from Masquerade to come back if you want it. There's a translation guide There's bloodlines, right? There's several bloodlines that are just specifically clans from Old World given a new flavor and new take. There's
That's mainly reactive because the original reaction to
no, they
Requiem.
three of the clans from Masquerade are in the Requiem core book as bloodlines. Malkavians, Toreadors, and Bruja. They changed the Bruja the most, but Toreadors and Malkavians are very similar to how they were in Old World. They even have the same flaws.
I almost get the
Uh,
vibe though that because I remember there was some backlash originally over Requiem kind of doing
they're
this.
they changed it and that it sucks. Basically, was their take because they're not
But
their
then
own
again,
unique
that's like
clans.
fourth edition from third for Shadowrun, since that
Ugh,
is the topic of this.
yeah, but it's like they're not unique clans anymore. And it's like, buddy, the point of Requiem is that every clan is a bloodline. Every bloodline is a clan. Like the distinction is the amount of vampires, right?
Also, it's
But
not like you
anyway,
can't just homebrew it. And anyway, so
yeah,
more Shadowrun. We talked about quality of change.
we're kind of out of things to talk about on Shadowrun mostly because without going into like grokking into the mechanics and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
we could always talk about how how players sometimes forget that the point of Shadowrun is to do this silently and quietly, hence the
well,
name.
sometimes,
Sometimes you're obvious,
sometimes,
but sometimes
sometimes Mr. Johnson says that I need this building blown the fuck up to distract for another crew. You know, because the cops need to be somewhere else while sneaky crew is getting into the building. The best way to do that is to have a crew of complete assholes over here who are being recorded for their fucking TikToks to blow the shit out of a fucking get and go. You know,
yeah, I mean, ideally, you don't want to pick those jobs unless you want to be, you know,
unless
your
you've got a very
face
good
on
escape
one.
plan from the cops, right? Now, again, this is like the whole black trench coat and mirror shades versus pink mohawk and katana, right? There's two very very different ways to play Shadowrun, which is one of them is where it's just you embrace the crazy. You just go like fuck it. We've got a troll with a mohawk full of dicks. That's what he's got. He's Dick McJohnson. He's got a big fucking dick.
We're
And
just gonna blow up the gas and go
our
and fucking take the
we're
register
gonna we're gonna do that. We're gonna go out in our fucking trippy hippie van
and
and all this
like
other
set fire to Sensodine's fucking fish market because of the fact that it causes pollutants which enrage this spirit
yeah
that turned toxic.
yeah, and we're doing all this for 50 Nuyen. You know, like you can do that.
No, that's not even that. Like, you could even pull like a Joker where you take the chip and light it on fire, and then you just go, sometimes
Yeah,
people want to watch the world burn.
there's a lot of interesting choices.
And then there's what I'm not saying this is the way you're supposed to, but kind of based on the name and kind of the original idea is you're trying not to get caught in terms of your face and identity because that's a pain in the ass to hide. And
Yeah,
especially since blood magic is a thing that they can use to immediately beeline where you are and murk you.
having your blood is all you need for a mage to fuck you up. They don't need it doesn't need to be blood magic. It's just the fact that it's a direct sympathetic line to you.
Yeah. So you got to play a little bit cautious because at least this variant where you have to play cautious. Mr. Johnson has a specific job, and ideally you don't want your face to be on the televised news,
Yeah, or you want it to be because you're a group of Shadowrunners who's doing a reality TV show for the Matrix.
which could also be fun.
Like the Shadowrun does give a lot of options for how do you want to actually play this.
And that's one of the beauties of it, but you got to make sure the entire party's there. Because I'm
Yeah,
envisioning, like you got your standard like kind of stealthy run where it's like, you're aiming to kind of stay somewhat anonymous because you don't want to get, say, murked by mages or by any, paid mercenaries or anything like that. But
yeah,
then some jackass brings in Kilgore the troll fucking tank man.
yeah. Or Liberace the troll. I love that green text.
Liberace the troll specializes in Libra.
His No, basically the idea was he was like, well, I wanted to make a troll street samurai, but I want to make him distinct, so I just made him incredibly gay. Like he wears all pink. He's got a he's he speaks like in the most effeminate way a troll possibly could.
By
You
the
know,
way,
like that sort of.
yeah, you didn't distract a person who wanted to talk about vampire. We spent like 18 minutes talking about American presidents. This stream's a dumpster. It's fine.
Yeah, that's the whole point of these is that we can go off and ramble. It's called lore rambles for a reason.
Like about that dragon president, because yes, dragons often shapeshift
Yes.
into
Oh my God,
CEOs
that's
and
the reason.
important
Because
people.
that's one of the things I forgot about 2050 is that orcs weren't citizens. Orcs and trolls were not citizens because they like meta humanity stuff. And the reason why they became citizens is because a dragon wanted to run for president and had a successful Supreme Court lawsuit. And this guy was also a like basically Letterman, and
That's
he's got a
hilarious,
religion
given
based
that
around him.
That
It's
dragons. There's a rule from Shadowrun. It was created because of things. Never make a deal with a dragon.
because dragons will fuck you over. Also because the biggest corporation in the setting, at least usually
At
the
least the
biggest
original
corporation,
one. Yeah.
they changed it for sixth is that actually for fifth. In fifth edition, it was one of the things where I was like, this is kind of interesting, and as an idea that suddenly Renraku just barely edges out Seder Krupp for top dog in the corporate seat before the next like uh check, basically like the audit came through, and now it's like, well, the next 5 years we're going to see who's on top again. For right now, it's Renraku, and Lorfweeder isn't happy about that. Or is it MCT? I can't remember which one. Um,
Either way, dragons, they get mad.
Either way, the dragon was not happy.
They were the big mad.
Yeah.
Also, aren't there space colonies, and why can't magic work in space?
Because
Magic
you need
doesn't like
living things
technology.
around you.
Yeah, and living things. And it doesn't like
You need living
technology.
things around you, which create a background interference. And that's the other thing is people forget about like Shadowrun is that there's ways to fuck with magic where essentially like if you put certain plants around or like bacteria that can affect how the background radiation for magic basically works and either like kill it or just
Amplify it.
amplify it to the point where it's just so uncontrollable that nobody can cast anything. I mean, either way it works. It's just that it depends on what your flavor is.
I'm just envisioning this corporate garden that's like in the middle of the building that is
This
intentionally designed to just utterly screw over mages.
That is a thing. There's actually stuff. There's like plants that specifically make spirits just kind of wonky around them, like catnip basically for spirits. It's called like Haven Lily, if I remember correctly. And it also fucks with astral space around it to a degree. The
The bonsai garden of death will become reality.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of also fluff around the corporations and how they do security stuff, which I think is quite interesting. And I mean, I wouldn't call Shadowrun a perfect setting, but it's definitely a very interesting take on.
Well, basically cyberpunk as a genre.
Yeah, and it does it in its own unique, special way, which again I think is to its benefit.
Well, I mean, it is in some ways more memorable than Cyberpunk 2020, at least as a tabletop game.
It is. It's definitely more memorable than Cyberpunk. I wouldn't say it's more memorable than Cyberpunk 2077's launch though. Also the
Oh,
Cyberpunk memes were great though. Like top tier meming. I'll give it that.
don't worry though, because hilariously, despite talking about Shadowrun, I have mentioned a game I'm planning on running sometime this year in the future is Cyberpunk 2020. I think I'm using second edition just because that's the one I have. I'm not gonna lie, since this is kind of related, in a way, I think I like how it does characters more than some places. Like it's one of the better character generators, just because it has some interesting flowcharts for life paths and stuff. You can get some very
Yeah.
elaborate backstories and builds.
Yeah. That's always been one of the advantages of some of these systems is that you can get
And it's D10,
very
so
diverse characters.
if you're used to the D10 system, it works kind of like that. Only I believe you apply your bonus based on your value. Like if it's like if you got like a 5, you use like a +5.
Hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
In their own words, it's style over substance, baby.
Yeah. I mean, that's very cyberpunk. Like very, very cyberpunk.
So I think we were talked out on at least Shadowrun. So
should we go back to presidents?
we could talk about crazy presidents for a little bit before
Or we
signing
could
off.
talk about the mantis cucks more.
Oh yes, the mantis alien. Okay, so we're gonna finish it off by talking about aliens for a little bit.
We're just gonna say one guy that you need to look up. There's some fantastic podcasts on this guy. His name is David Huggins, and it's like the Unbelievable podcast did a whole like 3-parter on this guy.
Because he's just that interesting and impressive.
Well, less that and more because he's. Let me give you a picture of something he's got here, and it's weird.
All right, guys, I'm gonna show you a weird picture made by this man.
He's an artist. He draws sort of his whole thing with UFOs, which I'm not sure if it's a schizophrenic. I don't know if this man was actually abducted because it's just that fucking weird.
I like how it's called Love One for those.
He's also from Hoboken, New Jersey. Though originally from somewhere else. He lives in Hoboken now, yeah. He lives in Hoboken now and worked at a deli, but he's an artist, and
it's telling that
I just look at this man.
I will show you this man now that I realized I can now show you. Let me show you.
And his whole thing about all this is like, what the actual fuck?
Let me show you love. There we go. There we go. Let's make sure it's behind the banner just because that's just how I do. I mean, he is a better painter than I'd be.
I mean, he also makes okay. So this is one of his safer work pictures because he had some interesting encounters with female aliens. And the reason why we're talking about the mantis cucks is because almost every time every picture he's got where he's usually fucking some alien chick, there's this mantis man in the background or like at the side in the corner of the room or whatever, just watching.
Which leads to my actual hypothesis on this.
All right, tell him this because this one.
So I don't know what his excuse is for the mantises, but my hypothesis is the mantis people, they're actually using the bodies as like the alien chicks as a meat suit, as a not like the Edgar bug suit, more like the Avatar, the crippled man's Avatar from James Cameron. It's a hit forgettable movie, Avatar, where it's just using them to understand the human body's reactions, maybe, or maybe it's just like a weird kind of rite of passage for them. Hell if I know.
It's literally Alien Spring Break.
Alien Spring
it's just
Break
what you
using
do.
alien women, not bodysuits, but like mind doubles or whatever.
Just like automatons or some shit. Like
like they control them through their telepathy. Who knows?
He felt the greater goods. No, it wasn't Tau. It's strange.
It's like gray alien women.
Grays that are also crossbred with humans, and he touched all the babies. I remember
he did
this
mention this many times that he touched all the children.
Well, not like that, but like they were dying, all of his children, like he had a bunch of them in alien space, and they're all dying, and the mantis cuck goes up to him like, I don't know what to do. They're all dying, David Huggins. You must save them. And so he touches them, and somehow they get life force out of him or some shit like that, and then they lived.
So Dave Huggins is the alien version of Black Cougar. He protects alien children.
he he's just he's just strange as a man.
Hello? I heard we're talking about alien sex fantasies. Can I share mine?
No,
No, and you just came literally right at the asset of the stream, man.
Oh
this
no.
You could stay.
I
We're probably okay
don't
with still talking about aliens a little bit.
I wouldn't share this one on stream,
I'm not.
but it's okay. There's
I'll
another.
describe it to the people witnessing it.
Okay, here's one of the mantis aliens.
Okay, I'm
And-
also
and
going
here's-
to I'm keeping him on.
No, this one you can save. This one you can save. You can share.
Save.
It's
Save. Like I'm gonna save any of this.
no, you can share because this one's safe for work. This is
I
him
like
with the alien
this.
babies.
I like this because it's so dumb.
It's so weird, right? And here's another safe for work one. Remember when I said like the mantis cucks? Like that's a mantis cuck right there.
Okay, let me
And
show
there's
you,
all the babies
viewers,
he needed to touch.
the mantis and the alien babies that this man had to touch.
Why not post it in the official Scum Discord server for all of our loyal viewers? You only get to see
I'll
this
paste this
alien.
one. This is
You
him
only-
with his alien girlfriend.
You
And
heard it, you
actually,
see
yeah,
here
for all
first.
three of you, let me
I-
actually get the Discord invite link for those curious.
I don't understand David Huggins. It's so fucking weird.
Hey, Alblaster, do you have any alien sex fantasies you want to share with us?
Some of these are really creepy too.
People are all coming in. It's like, yes, thank God they stopped talking about.
Thank God they stopped talking about Shadowrun and they
talking
decided
about
instead
alien
to talk about.
degenerates.
Yeah, Alblaster, we're talking about our alien sex fantasies. What's your favorite alien sex fantasy?
By the way, let's
Does
show
the check across the border count?
not
No,
bad.
but like his film that he wrote is called Love and Saucers.
He was oh, I just
just-
realized what he did. He traced Sigourney Weaver from Alien and just made her a gray.
Sort of, yeah.
He has a
It's
Sigourney Weaver fetish.
I don't understand.
That kid looking at the art photo, that kid's gonna grow up to be Jiren.
Okay,
He's gonna try to murder Goku.
so remember when I talked about the mantis cuck? Here's a picture of the mantis cucking.
He's right there. Like he's in the background staring.
Yeah.
For those watching.
Hold on, I need to get the
It's
image.
really telling that the moment we started talking about this, everyone
Right.
started coming on.
Like, okay, Shadowrun's interesting and all, but have you heard about alien sex perverts? Like,
I'm not
I
showing
mean-
Love and Saucers. That shit's illegal.
I just posted that in there if you want to watch the movie.
And for those for those of you, our loyal viewers, all three of you, I'll put the Discord link in the chat, much to my regret. Here you go.
And so here's the thing: when I was listening to him describe this, when he was describing the alien chicks, I was expecting something completely different than what he shows in these pictures, and I want to remind you, he's like, yeah, no, I loved her, she was great, like, and all that, and I'm like, I just this man is. That face is going to be in my fucking nightmares. I don't know how this man looks at this and is like, yeah, I'd fuck that.
All right. Oh, you're talking about the Sigourney Weaver looking imposter alien, right?
Yeah. And it's just like there's like the pictures of the fucking mantis cucks.
My dude, let me tell you, there's this Ford on 4chan. It's called ACO. You'd be surprised half the shit they fucking do, man.
I know, but like, oh, is he dead?
He might be. He's pretty old.
No.
I'll look him up. Is David Huggins dead?
I could tell you more fucked up things than that, but we're a family friendly stream.
He might be dead. I see a few obituaries for him.
I'm this is not safe for work, so don't display this in the stream. I'm just putting this in the Dicecom private chat here because this is
This
is some
this is too,
weird ass shit.
We'll get Yote off of YouTube if we show it.
So what?
You're saying that like it's a bad thing or something.
Oh,
Nothing of value
Real
was
thing is
lost
mortal
for our
coil.
channel.
I'm just.
I
What does this have to do with Shadow? I came in at the wrong time. What does this have to
okay.
do?
So Randall was here a little bit earlier, and we were talking about some of the other stuff that was going on, and how I was doing some research on this guy that basically started an alien cult, weird stuff. But then I mentioned like alien abductions and how there's almost always whenever like sexual encounters are involved, there seems to be like a mantis involved in some way, like a mantis man, and he's usually watching in some form or like an insectoid alien, and it's just like so he's like some like it's just like the mantis cucks.
He was
What is
asking
this?
why we weren't talking about. Well, you literally missed the entire part of the stream when we were.
This
Yeah,
is the end. Welcome to the end.
Well, this is the
Yeah.
end of. I guess it's the end of many things. I guess I'll have some voyeuristic mantis man come while I'm violently raped by an alien.
Like,
But such is life.
This is the weirdest fucking shit, right? Like, there's like fucking what's his name? Whitley Strieber, the guy that wrote Communion, who's like trying to pretend he's not gay because he liked the fact that the aliens kept probing his ass. And then there's David Huggins, who's just like, yeah, I got fucked with by an alien, and
I had sex with half alien Ripley. Ripley 8 from Alien Resurrection and the Mantis Man Watch.
Oh.
You forgot the man who also claimed he time traveled via the secret space government.
Yeah, that's a completely different story, and
Oh,
I think
now we got Greg in here too. Greg,
my
would you like to say-
Literally everyone showed oh thank God. Oh
shows
thank
up
God
when we
Shadowrun's over. Fucking Christ, that was awful. Let's talk
Shadowrun's
about
over. Let's talk about alien space perverts. Like
Greg, tell us about your alien sex fantasies.
What?
Greg,
Yeah,
I swear to God, Greg, you chose to enter this stream at the weirdest possible time.
I feel
We
bad
all
for
have
you,
to.
I'm not gonna lie.
I 100% feel bad for whoever watches this and they think the stream's gonna be over, and they're like, oh, the VOD, and then it's like suddenly, nope, out of nowhere, weird alien sex dude.
And then everyone
Well-
shows up.
Everybody shows
Really?
up.
Well,
It's just we all know that David Huggins is obviously the most Chad schizophrenic on the planet.
the thing is, you say it's weird, but you're
I'm
the
gonna be
one
honest. I'm
bringing
gonna
it
be
up.
honest.
so-
Looking at this reminds me of concept art for Morrowind.
You know, it kind of does.
It reminds me of the. It reminds me of that one Telvanni sorcerer who cloned him, who made rules,
Right.
rule 38, 34 clones of himself.
Rule
that he
63.
fucked. 63. I forget the rules of the internet. It was but where he fucking cloned gender swap versions of himself that he fucked.
By the way,
Yeah.
let me describe to you the strangeness of the not the smut, but the magical capacity of them. Just apparently only their heads are gray and the rest are just normal.
Normal woman. It's like what is this, right? Like, because here's the thing, right? He's drawing this for whatever fucking reason, right?
Gratification.
And I don't even know if it's sexual gratification because it doesn't sound like it when he's talking about this sort of stuff. That's
Maybe
the
it's-
weirdest
is it-
shit about this man.
I'm looking at a
Freudian-
picture of him. I'm looking at his old ass smiling as he's holding up a picture of him getting raped in the woods by an alien.
Are you sure you're not
What's so
talking
happy
about
about it?
I'm gonna be honest. This feels
Serious.
very Freudian in like the repressed sense.
Like, that's the thing about this man. I don't know if he was like actually molested or if he was. I don't think he was abducted, but like,
Well, he was abducted,
know
but
if-
not in the nice way. And it
Yeah,
was
like,
a
I don't know
mundane.
if- like that's the thing. It's like,
Yep,
Don't
that's- you
worry,
hear that?
David
That's the
Huggins. That's the CPS coming to save your life.
like that's,
It's about 70 years too late, but don't worry.
yeah, Biggie. If you look closely in the corner of that picture, there's a mantis man. He's
Wait,
hiding
where?
behind one of the bushes.
He likes drawing
Wait,
men
wait,
and watch.
Okay, so
Well-
like, so like, which way west of the rape are we talking about?
Take a look to the.
But nobody has answered my question. What does this have to do with Shadowrun?
We were done, and then you chuckleheads came
You
in.
guys just join in. And
I
because we were doing our final bit, because we've been talking about this before the stream with Randall, and
Let's rename this. Let's
Well, no,
rename
the
this
glitches in the
stream, like-
system is fucking perfect because everything strange happened.
So wait,
Yeah.
can I role play in Shadowrun myself getting raped by an alien? That's the mantis.
No, but you can play
No, but you
Changeling
can
and
in
then
you can in Changeling
If
or
you-
in Mage because Old Mage especially had
If you,
aliens.
if
They
you,
were
if you,
ghosts
if you
that
bring
came
that up
from
again,
beyond the
if you
firmament.
bring that up, I'm gonna bring up what you unironically wanted to play for my Mortals game.
what was that? I can't remember that.
Just fucking do it. I do it as a shitpost
He
all
wanted
the time.
he wanted to play a combat maid.
Did that for shit.
What?
Why don't you just play Made the RPG? I even have the
But,
book
like,
for it for you. if
yeah,
you need it.
like,
some other, no, because like I did that ironically because there was like something else I wanted to play as, but he said it was
Yes.
too stupid, and I did that just for shits and giggles, and he said, "Yeah, sure." I just felt insulted.
Yeah, because he thought you were just shitposting anyway, so it's like fuck it.
I think I wanted to play like Jake Paul or something like that.
Yeah,
give me any
honestly, the
ideas, but
combat
no,
Made
give me
sounds a
any other
lot
idea.
less painful.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
Anyway, in other weird alien stuff, if I have to recommend you look into this sort of stuff, the Unbelievers and the Unbelievable podcast are both really, really good. They have a lot of stories, a lot of great soundboard clips. Also, anything to do with Art Bell. The man is a fucking legend. Rest in peace. I have no idea how he tolerated all the weirdos that came onto his show over the years.
I think he just kind of saw it as entertainment for himself too.
Yeah.
You're talking about the
He's
guy who would like, didn't he have like a regular named Joe who would just like call for years?
JC?
Yeah, I thought it was
I
like
think you're
Joe or
talking about JC, the man who is like a 10-star general in the fight against pornography.
No, that's a different guy because there's also another guy that like was a regular conspiracy crank caller. I think his name was like Joe or something. And,
Yeah.
and he would call, and he was a regular from like at least years, literal years, where he would just regularly
Yeah.
call.
I mean,
Where he
there's-
might as well
he's
have been a part of the show, but he wasn't quite.
yeah, then of course there's Mel's Hole, which is just a great story. Like, look up Mel's Hole. Just Google Mel's Hole. It's a fun story. It's obviously fake, but it's just fun.
Oh God, I just
So I think to leave off, I think we should probably end this now, or else it just
with a PSA.
We'd have to rename the
PSA.
stream.
We got
don't
several
get
of
raped
those.
by aliens.
So
Well,
That's our PSA.
I found the review for Love and Saucers that I think we should leave out on. This review is by Steen Clanus. Oh my fucking god! FNN rad, raped by an alien. Can I get some action, please? My wife's boobs are small.
Oh my god.
yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Night.